Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the general topic podcast that takes a topic each week and, as the name suggests, casts views. This week, I've got Leo Allen with me again. I've really been looking forward to seeing you again. Hi, Leo.
Hello, Dan. Thanks for having me back. I've been looking forward to this.
No, all good, all good. No, it's my pleasure. Actually, we'll get onto the topic in a bit. But yeah, I think it was a month or a couple of months ago had you on. How have you been? How's life treating you?
Been great. I think since then, I started working for a different agency as an information technology director, and quite a few other life changes that I guess we'll touch on here in a bit. Some pretty big news a thing in particular that happened, and just staying busy.
Good. We'll tell you what. Let's hear from some friends because, as Leo said, I got him on specifically for this subject, and I think it mixes a little bit of personal view and also kind of what you know for. I've tend to have got you on. Well, the casting hot takes was a totally random episode I've got you on, and I absolutely loved that. So maybe we should do another one in a couple of
Oh
months
yeah,
and invite a couple of other pods on.
yeah.
Because you're kind of more known, you've done a lot around the tech world, and it kind of mixes in a little bit about that. So, tell you what, let's hear from some friends, and then we'll get stuck into it.
Do you love comics, movies, video games, and more? We do too. Join me, Josh Scar, and my cast of colorful co-hosts on Talking Smack. Look for our yellow and red icon on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, and other podcast players.
Right, so we're going to speak about the world of medicine, and I've said on this pod a couple of times that some of the big advances that have happened and some that are coming up, or I think coming up, are going to be in the medical world. So when I approached you about this, there was a specific reason which, happy when I hand over to you if we want to go straight into that. We looked at talking about, and you helped me really frame it well, where we've been, where we are, and cast an eye. And yeah, we'll keep this for prosperity for like 10 years and we'll see if anything we talk about actually comes true.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going to in the world of medicine and medical procedures. So, what's your view? Where do you want to start on this?
Well, we get started. I can share what had happened. Like people like to say, what had happened was.
Yeah.
No, I had shared before, and actually we did a podcast party one time about this as well to raise funds for the National Kidney Foundation. And that was a pretty good time. I had a bunch of different podcasts on. But long story short, I have a daughter. She's 20 years old now. She was in chronic kidney failure and got to the point as of last year, it was, okay, because they can maintain kidney failure for so long with medications. But the thing with kidneys is they don't get better. So once you're in failure, they're going to eventually fail. There is no, suddenly your kidneys got better. So they monitor certain levels of things, creatinine and things like that. And once they reach a certain level, they say, okay, now you have to get on the donor list. So she got on the donor list, and it was, that same conversation. Hey, it can happen quickly or it can take a while. It can be a few years out. So there's going to be dialysis involved. So she got on dialysis, and I learned a thing there that they do home dialysis. I used to always, I only knew kidney dialysis from people who would have to, you have to make these appointments and go to the hospital. Well, actually, there's this small dialysis machine, and they give you all the solution and the tubes and blah, blah, blah. And they put a special catheter inside of you and yada, yada. And you just do dialysis at home. And she had to do it every night. And, this was dialysis. Again, that's just a stopgap measure until you get a donor. So, of course, all of my family and a few friends, everyone filled out the donor. People stepped up saying, hey, I could be a donor. They did the swab, and you send everything in. And I have a sister-in-law who ended up being a match. And she said, yes, of course, I'll do it. So long story short, my daughter only waited 6 months to get a kidney transplant. So in February of this year, she got a new kidney. And it's amazing the turnaround, how her health it turned around literally within a week. It's really amazing to me how important the kidneys are for where they are and the size that they are. They're like those organs that I think you don't think about until you have to think about them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, you said she didn't have to wait long, 6 months, but I bet it probably did it not feel like an eternity.
Well, it certainly did for her.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it was amazing. So I was talking about the kidney function levels. Once you hit 14%, that's considered critical failure. She went well below 14%.
Wow.
So when she got her kidney, and she only got one of them because, when you donate a kidney, you donate one. Because another thing I found out is technically we only need one kidney. So we
Okay.
have two as a backup. It's like God thought of everything. So just in case you got another one, just in case. And another thing I learned too, this was crazy to me, is when you are receiving a kidney, as they don't take out one of the old ones. They just find a spot on your body to put a new one.
Really?
Yeah. So hers is kind of in front and kind of under her belly.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And even crazier, the
Huh.
consultant that we worked with said, "Oh, yeah, we just find a spot." He said, "There's people walking around with about 5 kidneys."
Wow.
Because what happens is living donor kidneys are the best. You can, what do they call that? I'll just say the expectancy of it is you should get 20 years from a living donor kidney. Now, if you get a donor from someone who's deceased, you get about maybe 10, maybe 15 years. So a lot of times people get deceased donors. So the turnaround is they got to get another one. And he said, yeah, there's people walking around with like 5 kidneys.
Wow. So, because they just keep adding them.
Yeah, and they just find another spot on your body to put another one.
Wow. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah. Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. And firstly, obviously, thank you for sharing. And at 20, I mean, well, your daughter, I mean, I'm glad to hear you said she's absolutely fine now.
Perfect. Like it was like night and day. With kidney failure, there's a lot of fatigue. So you have pretty much zero energy. I mean, it got to the point where she could barely get out of bed,
Right.
do one
Yeah.
or two things, and then she'd have to go lay back down. Um, nausea comes with it as well. So she could barely eat, but she got the transplant. It was like a light switch.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
very same day, once the surgery was complete, she's eating. She starts eating more. And then it was really fun watching her kidney function go up and up. And they would come in and they test and they'd say, okay, she's at 60% now. And then she'd be at 80. And then by the time she discharged, and it was 4 or 5 days before she left the hospital, she was at 98% function, like a brand new woman.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And like I
Yes, it
said,
is.
absolutely fair play to her because I mean, at that age, it's so tough. And like I said, having to do the dialysis, like I said, that isn't something I thought you'd be able to do at home.
Now, there is one downside to that, which I'm still kind of upset about. So they deliver you all the solution and supplies, and they deliver them to you in bulk. And these are boxes and boxes of this dialysis solution and whatnot. And it's a monthly delivery. However, once you're done with dialysis, they just tell you to throw any extras you have away.
Oh, really?
In my
Right.
basement right now, I have boxes and boxes of the solution. And it's like, I don't feel right throwing it away. And we keep
Yeah.
trying to find someone to take it. But they even told us you're going to be hard pressed to get rid of it that way because it's considered a prescription. Yeah. And you can't,
Okay.
just like any other prescription medication, you can't just give it away. But we're trying. We're like, can we get it to like Ukraine or somewhere? Someone needs this.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to just throw it away. That just seems it's wasteful. And yeah.
And probably the cost of it as well. Anyway, so is that like you said? You said because it's considered a prescription, and I was wondering, is it also because it's come out of their process, so it's left their ownership, so they can't know how it's been stored, etc.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot to that too. And, how do they trust me? Like, hey, this guy just showed up with all these boxes. Did he do something with them? But you can't really tamper with them. I mean, because if you poke a hole in it, it's over. This is all liquid solution, and they're huge bags. So it's like, I just want to, I want to give it to someone who needs it. I don't want to just throw it away. And not to mention the environmental impact.
And did you say it was her aunt that was the donor, and all okay there?
Yes. And oddly enough, there is the donor tends to suffer more pain afterwards because, your kidneys are in your lower back, and getting to them is pretty tough. And that's another reason why they don't give recipients, they don't take out the old one and put a new one in, because the recovery time, I'm sure they probably tried that the first time and it was probably a disaster, and someone figured out, no, we don't need to do it that way. But oddly enough, her aunt, she discharged the next day after the surgery, but she's kind of a tough old broad. So she was like, no, I'm going home. She was in pain, but she wanted to go home.
Well, that's what I think. We sprain an ankle or something, and we want to take a couple of weeks off, and people have gone through major surgery.
Right.
And I remember you telling sort of our group as well about it, and I just thought it's such an amazing thing. And we'll talk about transplants in general, but I've said before with a couple of other things, I know we're at the point where science has advanced and procedures have advanced and education and knowledge, but something like this where you're taking an organ from someone and putting it into someone else just still blows my mind. I just think it's amazing that we can do that.
It is incredible. I think about that all the time. Like, whoever thought, people are just smart. There are really smart people to come up with this stuff. And it just blows me away. And it's really interesting when you hear the stories of some of these surgeons and how they get to where they are. For example, the kidney consult that we had, he was a surgeon, and he was also a liver transplant recipient. And his story was he wasn't a surgeon, and I forget what happened to his liver. And then he needed a transplant, and he said he was one of the ones, he was on a waiting list for a few years, so it was pretty tough for him. And when he finally got it and how his life turned around, he said, from then on, I was just fascinated with it all. So he ended up going to medical school and became a transplant surgeon.
I was trying to get like a timeline of things. What I could see anyway, the first transplant itself was a cornea transplant, and this was in 1905, which I kind of wanted to find out a bit more about. Yeah, which I'm amazed at that in that year.
They went for the eyeball first?
yeah, I guess it was there, accessible.
Oh, that always gives me the shivers thinking about surgery on my eyes. No.
You can't go anywhere near my eyes. Actually, I had to have this week, a couple of days ago, I had to have an eye check. And where they do the pressure test where they blow the air into your eye? I mean, it takes them about 10 attempts just to do that. And they're not even touching the eye.
And they always say, don't blink. Like, are you serious right now? I'm going to blink.
Absolutely. Yes. So get settled in. The first successful kidney transplant I got was 1950, and that was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
First successful lung transplant was in 1963. And it was on kidneys, as we talk about that. I think in the UK, the first one was in 1960. And random, the year I've got 2009, 2010, but there were 2,694 kidney transplants performed. So this is 15 or 13 years ago. So it's just, it is just amazing now. Like we're talking about the cornea, but there isn't almost anything. Skin grafts, I guess you can call a transplant of some sort, to a lesser degree. So it's just, like I still think, like I said, I'm still trying to comprehend that we are at a point where we are, like cars, almost automobiles. We are replacing parts and to keep us going.
And we're swapping them out with each other. So
yeah. So transplants have had a very long history. Actually, when you look at it. So yeah, and sorry, just that the first skin transplantation, actually, they called it autograft transplantation, I got was in 1869. So,
And don't forget, skin counts because you do know the largest organ in the human body is the epidermis.
yeah, very
So,
true. Very true. Yeah. Yeah, 1869. And just to fill in the story of that, it was a person's nose that was destroyed by syphilis, and they grafted flesh from
oh
the
my
inner
God.
thigh to the nose. Yeah, yeah. So, so
Oh,
that person's gone down in history for that. The first skin transplant, but also because it
how
was
does
caused
your
by
n-
syphilis.
how does your nose get destroyed by syphilis?
I don't know. I don't know, but
That was one freaky weekend.
that person has gone down in history for two things now.
They called him old syphilis Jim. Lost his nose, got a transplant. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yeah. So while we're on transplants, was there anything else, anything more from yourself in the area of transplant?
Well, I do have a couple things that I was going to bring up history wise. I like to
Mm.
start from the beginning of stuff because once I get fascinated by something, I think a little foundational history helps to,
Yeah, yeah,
just to understand. And I just started
absolutely.
doing a broad search of things. And the one thing I started with was blood transfusions for some reason, probably because I'm a bit macabre. And I was thinking about, when was the first time this ever happened? So it was in 1628. An
Wow.
English physician named William Harvey discovers the circulation of blood, and then
Mm.
shortly after, the first known blood transfusion was attempted. Now, it doesn't say whether or not it was successful, but then in 1665, the first recorded successful blood transfusion occurred in England. It was an physician named Richard Lauer, but he did it to dogs. So this was more like an
Right.
experiment. He was doing experimental blood transfusions.
Yeah.
And then we just fast forward. So the first successful human transfusion was in 1818. James Blundell, and he performed the first transfusion of human blood to treat postpartum hemorrhaging. So
Okay.
apparently there was a woman, had given birth and wouldn't stop hemorrhaging, and he performed the first blood transfusion. And the remarkable thing about blood transfusions, because I think the first biggest problems they ran into just reading into the history was they couldn't figure out, well, it's blood. Why is it, it wouldn't work for some people. There were a few people that died. And then that's when they figured out, oh, there's different types of blood.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
didn't, they discovered that in 1900. And that's when we started getting the blood groups A, B, and O. But, even further research, I mean, now we have what, O positive, O negative, A positive, yada, yada, yada. But it's that trial and error that they had to go through to eventually get to where we are today. And now, if you think about it, blood transfusions are so almost commonplace. I mean, we have blood drives, we have mobile blood drive units. I don't know if you guys have those there.
Yes. Yeah.
Often we have hospitals, they'll drive up those buses and say, hey, today is blood drive, come and give blood. And they're always asking for blood. Um, but then I start to think, you know, what could the future look like with blood transfusions? But I really I don't think there's really much technological advancement you can do with blood transfusion.
No, I mean, because like I said, we're doing it now, but also you can now do plasma, can't you? So they can do
Yeah.
plasma extraction and transfusion. So yeah, and just going back to that, I mean, maybe I sometimes think, because I said, wow, when we're saying, because 1828 obviously it was such a long time ago, and maybe we like to think, or I like to think that all the advances are happening now. We are the most knowledgeable we are now, but
Right.
those were the times where they were making the big, scary advances, right? These were if we
Being
think about it,
first, yeah, being first, that's
yeah.
always a huge accomplishment. So,
Especially without some of the things we'll probably talk about later on, equipment wise and tech wise, that we have nowadays.
Right. Because if you think now, when something's that commonplace and we think, yeah, we're so smart, we got it down to a science. Well, it took time to build to this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a time when people would almost, or people did die from blood transfusions because they didn't really understand it at the time. So, but look at us now.
And even the thing you brought up about the blood types, it's amazing because you just think, right, we're all humans, so blood is blood, right? But no, even to that degree where we've got the varying types, so it's not a simple case of, okay, let's get person A and give their blood to person B.
And to be truthful, I don't even know what the types mean. I don't even know what
No.
makes them different. I have no clue.
Well, all I know is there's one. I can't remember which one it is. I think you can give to anyone, if that's right. I think one of them can go to anyone, but
I think
otherwise
it's,
you have to have
is
the
it
specific type.
O or something
I
like
think,
that?
oh, yeah.
Because we went through that during the transplant journey was,
Okay.
they talked about the blood, blah, blah. And then you talked about plasma. I don't understand this either because it's the same buses that pull up and they'll say, okay, well, we need plasma. And they hook you up. It looks the same to me. I'm like, well, what's the, I'm just giving blood. What are you talking about plasma? So I don't claim to understand that either.
I'll be honest with you. The only reason I knew about it was they were doing, when COVID started here, they were asking for, I think they were after plasma donators for people who had COVID. I wonder if it was going to be used in research because at the time they were just trying to get as much evidence as they could. But yeah, if we're going to go along the whole kind of like automobile comparison, I guess blood transfusion like the oil change, right? I guess is that,
Right.
is that what we're saying? Yeah.
Give me some WD-40 or some
Yeah.
whatever.
But we were talking about the procedures at the time. I came back to mine. I can't remember now when it was. It may have been a couple of years ago, but we went to London and me and my wife went to visit the oldest surgery or one of the oldest surgeries that you can actually visit now. And it's, I think it was first used in 1860. And you look at it and you see how small it was, you see how open it was. It was wooden. You look at the books where they have the actual manuals of how they were doing certain procedures. And yeah, I just think this is one thing I just don't want to imagine what it was like at that time because it must have been brutal as well, right?
Oh, everything was amputation and cauterizing, which amazingly they still cauterized to this day.
Yeah.
But not like it was back then, though.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I was going to do, I kind of took it off my list. Anesthesia is obviously a massive boon because without that, we'd be still going, bite on this leather strap, please, kind of thing. Or
drink some whiskey, some whiskey and bite the strap. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I find anesthetic amazing because, I've had a couple of procedures in the last few years and you're just lying there and they did that classic thing where they used to make you count to 10, didn't they? Either forwards or backwards. But now they're just asking you questions. And they must love their job because they know the minute they're going to knock you out and they love it. I think there's an enjoyment to talking to you and then putting you under like that. And then when you wake up and the whole, how they just can wake you up just like that for it. I said, again, the whole medicine and the whole process behind that, the science is the word I'm looking for. I think it's amazing as well.
And I think it's amazing too that how they, speaking of anesthesia and anesthesiologists, how they've developed that over time. So, for example, when my daughter was going back for her surgery, what they do now, what I've learned, especially with big surgeries like that, is they don't just put you to sleep. They first offer you something called I don't really care medicine. So they give you the shot, makes you a little loopy.
Yeah.
And it's like you just relax more because the way it was explained to me was they discovered with anesthesia that sometimes people get too nervous knowing that they're going to be put under, they're nervous enough as it is with the procedure. And that can have an adverse effect on the procedure itself. So they discovered we needed to make people relax first and then knock them out.
To give you a little sedation first and then knock you out. Yeah. Like I said, I think it's amazing. And then I tend to veer between when I've woken up, either just being really tired and not grumpy, but just really tired and monosyllabic to kind of just won't stop giggling and laughing with the nurse that's waking me up. So, yeah.
I also, That's part of my theory of time travel too, but we'll talk about that another day.
Oh, there we go. Got your next episode. Actually, yeah, I've been thinking about time travel a lot recently. We won't go into that. Okay, so where do you kind of want to steer the conversation now?
So the next thing I looked at was because I don't know why this suddenly has been on my mind lately, only because I was just wondering whatever became of this, because it used to be this really, really big deal. Like open heart surgery and artificial hearts. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
first looked into open heart surgery. And the first open heart surgery was performed by a Black surgeon named Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. Um, he performed the first surgery back in 1893. It was interesting because his story was it wasn't really that's what he set out to do. He set out to say he wanted to establish, because you got to remember the time period and how America was back then. He wanted to establish a hospital mainly for Black people and that could train Black nurses. He felt, the training that they were getting was subpar because of racism, they were just kind of shoved to the side. So he managed to convince Chicago that, yeah, we're going to build this hospital. And then sometime after that, there was someone who ended up having I'll have to read through this. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep the flow. So one summer night, a young Chicagoan named James Cornish was stabbed in the chest and rushed to Providence, which was the hospital that the doctor established. So when the patient started going into shock, the doctor suspected a deeper wound near the heart. He asked 6 doctors to observe while he operated, and he was the first one to cut that deep, open the body cavity, the rib cage and everything to get to the heart to perform the first open heart surgery, which is incredibly wild. Again, think about that time back then. Even, we were talking about being first. Here's the thing that would freak me out. I don't know. Have you ever worked on cars?
No, not personally.
Or have you ever worked on anything where it was already put together and you're like,
Oh
I know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
need to fix, and you start
yeah,
taking it apart, and then it's like, oh
yeah,
crap,
yeah.
I have to remember how to put all this stuff back. Imagine doing that to a person. I got to put all this stuff back.
I
can't.
can only imagine how, again, and I use the word, I don't mean to use it lightly, but how brutal that must have been,
Oh my gosh.
again, with the tool. And fair play, because again, what did you say, 1890, 1890s?
1893. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, the time of that. So, it's honestly, we are just refining rather than anything. We the pioneers back at that time in terms of blazing the trail in these processes we do just as standard now. But can you imagine the the people around him when he was telling, "This is what I'm going to do. This is what we need to
Like,
do." Imagine the
what?
reaction. Yeah,
Are
yeah,
you crazy, man?
yeah. It's just because obviously you've got to get through the ribs, haven't you? It's got to be quite a traumatic procedure.
I do have a somewhat traumatic story to share about that. I had an uncle, a Frenchman actually, up in Canada. He's passed away since, but he had, I think, a total of 5 open heart surgeries. The first one he had, and I was really young when he had the first one. By the second one, I think it was, he was telling us what it was like. He was like, yeah, they break your ribs basically.
Yeah,
They have
yeah,
to. They break
yeah,
your
yeah,
ribs, open you up, do what they got to do, and then they mend you back up. It's like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Like just metal wire, I think this to pull them back together. I mean,
Oh,
my
I
mum, she had about 23 years ago now. I think she had a triple bypass as well, and yeah, it's yeah, they have to get in there, don't they? It's,
I'm like, do they just pop the bones or?
They must
I mean,
just saw through. Yeah, they must just saw through them, and I think it's because I know, if I remember right, it's metal wiring to kind of maybe
Mm,
pull them together to get them to fuse together again. Because bones will kind of heal, won't they?
yeah. Well, now we're at the point today, there are nearly 900,000 open heart surgeries performed each year, nearly a million every year.
Yeah.
So you
They-
imagine the first guy, and then now it's again pretty much commonplace.
Well, that's it. And if it wasn't for him, these million people a year,
Yeah.
yeah, would be suffering. And I wonder if you could go back and say to him, look, what you're doing is going to be done up and down the country in little rooms, in big rooms with tech, going to be done just like that, and people will be recovered in however many weeks.
And I think that the other 6 doctors around him would be like, "No, shh, don't say that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
This guy's
well,
crazy. The patient's
but
not
the
going to make it."
the difference being we're going to do it with anaesthetic nowadays. That's the thing.
Oh my gosh. Now,
Oh,
where I do think this is going, we talked about robots the last time I was on,
yes,
and I
yes, we
was
did.
telling you about because there's a lot of robotic assisted surgeries,
Yeah,
and I think we're going to see more and more of that with more sophisticated precision instruments. And
yeah,
yes, a lot of it will be powered and assisted by AI. I know everybody
yeah,
thinks that's the scary thing nowadays, but no, it's not. Um, but, and of course, there's going to be humans involved as well. But I think, further down the line, specifically with open heart surgery, I think we're going to see more and more technological advances with robotics and computing power to assist. Mainly, I think the 2 advantages there are the speed at which the surgery can be completed, as well as the sterility. The more sterile you have of an environment
yeah.
for a surgery, the better. So, and let's face it, humans, we're disgusting. And the more people you have in a room during an open heart surgery. So if you can have a nice, clean, sterile environment, that's even better. So,
Well, we're kind of already seeing the whole remote surgery, aren't we?
yeah,
Where a surgeon is controlling a robotic arm elsewhere. And what that also does is, what that means is you can put these, if you can get these bits of equipment into remote parts of the world, you don't then need to have surgery set up, theatres. You
right?
just need, you don't need to fly out because, before you've had to fly out specialists all around the world. That specialist doesn't have to leave his own theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope you've got good broadband providers, but it's but
You got to have super high speed.
yeah, the whole remote thing is amazing. But yeah, because I've got a couple of things as well in and around that. But I just wanted to raise one more thing about what I think again is amazing now. And when you look back at it, that the history again is in the 1800s. It's the whole imaging. So, nowadays we get X-rays, ultrasounds, CT scans, MRIs. We can get them. I had one a couple of weeks ago on my ankle. I went and saw the consultant on a Monday. Saturday I had the MRI, and the hospital where I do it is not these big rooms with what do they call it? The radiography rooms. This is on the back of a truck trailer. It's a mobile one that goes around various hospitals in the country. And this is you go
Right.
out you go out the hospital, up the steps into the trailer, and they've got an MRI scan in there. And if you think about what that's done for being able to diagnose, potentially save unnecessary surgery, or to find surgery where it may not have been immediately visible. The fact that we can now get 3D images of our organs in our body, I just think that has got to be, along with kind of anesthesia and just general processes, one of the biggest advances. I mean, like I said, I guess we've all had one of those types of imaging processes done to us, right?
Yeah. And radiology is fascinating in and of itself. I worked for a group of radiologists a few years back, and just those MRI machines and they're magnets. They're just giant magnets, and I
Yeah,
don't know how it all works, but I know there's these giant magnets, and just the thought of that again. these people who are smart enough to figure this out, like, how do you glean an image out of this? And to
Yeah,
listen
yeah.
to radiologists read images, oh my gosh. And there are transcriptionists involved, and because those guys, I don't know if you ever heard that or seen how they read your images. And they're just talking. They go, "Da, da, 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 the patient has a," so blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah," and they're talking to the little recorder, and then they hand it off to a transcriptionist who documents it all. It's just incredible to watch them work. Now, there's, again, I keep bringing it back. There's also a push, and actually, it's already there. There's AI being used for that sort of thing because now there are some things that AI can detect that a doctor, a radiologist may miss.
So yeah, so that's the subject of imaging, which was the other thing that I thought I just had to mention in this.
Yeah, it's incredible. Again, and we keep using that. I keep using that word incredible because
Yeah.
I swear, uh, I think of all the sciences, medical science is perhaps, well, for one, it has the greatest impact on everyone. And for two, it's just incredible to think about the kinds of things that, these people come up with to solve problems. So, which brings me to the next thing that I remember. I was talking about, I started thinking about heart, open heart surgery, blah, if I could talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what really made me think about it was I started thinking, now I can't remember how old you are, Dan, but I do remember back in, I believe it was 1987, where there was just this huge chatter about, do you remember the Jarvik 7?
Not by name. Not by name.
So what that was the first successful artificial heart.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it was Robert Jarvik who created the Jarvik 7. Now, it's important to remember because I remember when it was huge in the media. It made, worldwide media, artificial heart, artificial heart. But I was reading some of the history about it. And even Dr. Jarvik himself said, well, the first person he performed it on, he was like, I don't think he's going to make it past 10 days. He's like, that's not, this isn't really a replacement heart because, of course, that's how it was billed in the
Yeah.
media. Oh, we're
Yeah.
all we can, we're all saved. We can just all have artificial hearts. Again, it's kind of like dialysis. It was created as a stopgap measure
Yes. Yeah.
to give people with heart disease more time before they get a living donor. Um, and he went on to say one thing that disappointed him about the whole experience, again, of course, with the media. I mean, it really was a major medical breakthrough. However, he said it disappointed him that the media ran with the story the way they did. And when they realized the truth of what it was really for, all they could do was start pointing out all the things that went wrong. Even though he had said from the beginning, this is not a heart replacement. This is just a stopgap measure.
Yeah. It's I'm just thinking also what happened to Jarvik 1 through 6, but maybe I should ask that.
Well, Jarvik 1 caught fire. Jarvik 2.
Yeah. But yes, it is unfair, and it must be really frustrating because, like you said, he never claimed it to be anything other than what he said it. But it's the media and everyone else putting all that hype around it.
And even, back then I was still in high school and I remember going, wow, they can make artificial hearts.
Yeah, yeah,
And then when you
yeah.
see the thing, it's like, well, that doesn't really look like a heart. Well, the point was not really a heart. It's
It's just enough, like you said. Yeah, yeah, the stopgap.
and I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was 1982 when the first one.
Again, yeah, still sort of quite early on in terms of if we look at the tech that's come since. Have you followed up in terms of creating organs now? Are we at a place where that's a thing, or we're doing a bit more of it? I mean, because I do remember there's that image of we've all seen that image of that mouse where it had the ear on the back of it, where they're
Well,
growing the ear.
It's funny you say that because I was going to say where we are right now with the artificial heart, sadly, a lot of research and development kind of fell off with it because, again, the way it was misreported, but they still use them to this day. There's different ones and they still use them. But so my speculation for the future is that I think that they can revisit this and make them better. And I think that one thing that will help it is what you just mentioned. If they can start, you know, getting a better grasp on basically lab grown flesh. And if they can find a way to meld it with the artificial heart so you can have a more quote unquote fleshy artificial heart, I think there's a future there.
Yeah, I guess we're saying, and we'll probably say that tech is going to be everything, and tech is going to be at the heart of everything. But the other biggest thing it would be, yeah, if you could clone organs, or sorry, not clone. Maybe that gives the wrong
It's
impression, but
lab
lab
grown.
grown, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, lab grown organs would. If you think that, well, you'll know yourself, and you've already not alluded, you've mentioned it, is that it's the wait for a viable organ, which is the most difficult thing, right? And the
Yeah.
time consuming thing. So yeah, if we can eliminate that stress out of what people are already going through, that would be an absolutely fundamental breakthrough, wouldn't it?
And speaking of that, have you heard about the lab grown chicken?
I'm not sure I have. No.
Well, it's
Oh, as
becoming
in
kind
lab grown meat. So as
yeah,
in, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, I think I have. Yeah, yeah.
It's becoming quite a big deal here because ironically, I just heard this morning on the news that they've approved, um, however that approval process goes, to allow them to continue to ramp up. And on the one hand, I do agree with them because one of the I've heard one of the major negative impacts to the environment is actually industrial farming, um, and raising animals and livestock has a huge impact. So if we can eliminate that and say, well, we just make all of we make all of our meat
Yeah, yeah,
here in this factory now, and of course, in the beautiful state of California, the largest group that's doing this right now, they're running a facility that is, if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to look this up, or we can ask K and J because who better to ask than some Californians themselves. Um, this facility runs, I think it's completely solar powered, maybe, or it's something about they run off all clean energy, and they can make. They were talking this morning. They said they can make more chicken faster than your average chicken farm factory or whatever you want to call them, and
yeah, and
cleaner.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I was going to say, and chicken farming is notoriously, or historically, in a lot of places, very bad, isn't it, in terms
Oh
of
yeah.
how it's farmed? So, but yeah, that's a whole other episode there. Lab grown organs, that'll be a huge breakthrough. Yeah,
Could you imagine if they could lab grow a full heart? How incredible would that be?
yeah. I mean,
And they
like I
could
said,
extract your DNA and your blood to build this. So your body, it would just be your heart again. So you wouldn't have to worry about organ rejection.
so, I mean, just this will be a side note, but in terms of organ donation in the States, I'm assuming it's still, is it voluntary or you have to opt in? Because here they changed it recently. I think you have to opt out of it now.
Oh, so you're automatically a donor and you have to opt out.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
think,
I think it
you
only
know,
changed recently.
I think I heard that before. And I thought, really? I didn't. And now that you're saying it, so
I think
can you
it's
confirm, Dan?
yeah,
This-
20th of May 2020, the law around organ donation in England was changed to allow more people to save lives. The law has changed. It will be considered that you agreed to become an organ donor when you die. If you are over 18, you have not opted out and you are not in an excluded group. So, yeah, so now you actively have to opt out of being a donor.
Oh, well,
So
I
it's
can
quite a big
I
move.
can I can see both sides of that coin. So here it's still, yeah, you have to opt in, and but they made it as easy as when you go to renew your driver's license. They say, "You want to be
Mhm.
an organ donor?" Yeah, sure. I always say yes because my thing is when I'm dead anyway.
At
What
that
am I?
point, yeah. and,
What's the
and I've always said, I'm not laughing like that, but I always say, if anyone can find anything of use in my body when I've gone, then fair play to them, because all the ailments and stuff that I've had.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
I've said that too, but I've heard that ironically, nah, that doesn't really matter. You may be suffering right now, but when you die, you got some valuable stuff in you, buddy.
yeah. Well, yeah. So there you go. If you're in England, you didn't realise, yeah, you now have to opt out.
Otherwise, it's the chopping block for you.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest problems why that law would never fly here is because of there's a lot of civil rights
Mm,
groups that would say absolutely not, because there's people who for religious reasons they will not ever donate organs.
yeah. Yeah.
I even when I was in elementary school, I lost a friend. She was in a simple car accident, and I mean, we were like 10 or 11 years old, and she ended up dying because her family refused to let them give her blood
Such a shame.
for because of religious beliefs. So,
I'm kind of surprised they did do that here. Yeah, the only thing I had left on my list, which is possibly going to meld into what we think it might come in the future, is it's a whole thing now about wearable tech. Sorry, and by that I know it's fairly simplistic, but we've all, our smartphones now register our steps. We've got we can wear blood monitors. We've got, even now I think there are wearable diabetes, like blood sugar monitors. I think so it saves you having
oh
to do the
yeah.
old finger prick.
You ever see that little circle on some if you ever see a little white plastic circle on someone's shoulder, that's what that is.
Yeah, again, amazing. The fact that this doing
Yeah.
these things is measuring blood sugar. Even to kind of the tech we're now having more and more in the house. So a lot of people I know here have got the blood pressure monitors at home. I was saying to you beforehand that COVID saw a boom in the oxygen monitors. The thing you slip over the end of a finger. So yeah, I just wonder if there's more and more at home on the person diagnosis kit. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, the biggest thing, it's your smartwatches. So, for example, I wear the Google Pixel Watch. It does the same thing. It does the CO2 measuring, the blood oxygen saturation. Apple was famously known for perfecting that with the Apple Watch. So, yeah, you're right. Wearables. Now, there was a time, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, when a lot of technologists were saying, well, the future is wearables. Everyone's worried about these assistants and AI
Mm,
and new cell phones because let's be honest, I think we've reached pretty much the plateau for cell phones. I
yes.
think we
Yeah.
reached
Yeah.
it years ago. And that's why
Yeah.
they keep pouring so much into the camera on the phone. It's like, because you can't really get past this blank rectangular glass front slate. This is about the end of it, right? So they had, so technology is like, well, what do we need to do next? Well, like you mentioned, health, being able to capture our own current health status through these devices, it's become a vital thing. I mean, you can even send all of that information to your doctor to
Yeah.
read for
Yeah.
you. Uh,
Well, I've
s-
actually got, sorry, I've got, with my employment, I've got private healthcare, and here it is notoriously difficult to get a GP appointment. But with this, they've got an app. I can get an appointment that night or the next morning with a GP online. It was a video call. I got my referral letter for my ankle within half an hour after the call, and then I saw, then the whole thing about going to see the consultant and getting the MRI. So, the medical world coming into your own home feels like it's really, that's, yeah, like I said, that's the galloping pace now. So what more will we be able to start doing? Will we be able to flash a device at our leg and get an X-ray from an image from? No, who
As
knows?
soon as we can figure out how to make radiation safe, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you even like the little home devices that we have. For example, I have the little Google Home Hub, and there's also what's the Apple called? Not Home Basics. Anyway, those devices, and I think Amazon is going to put it in the Echo, even though I keep hearing the Echo is on the chopping block for death. But what I was going to say is, sleep is valuable. So now they've made these devices to where they monitor your sleep while you're sleeping, and they can
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
about your sleep quality, and you don't even have to put it on. It sounds a little creepy, but it essentially watches you sleep, and it can calculate your sleep patterns through your breathing, and it can hear, snoring is apparently a sign of a health problem. You have people who have to have those CPAP machines, which
Yes,
even
yeah.
those are evolving too. So yeah, the home healthcare, I think that's going to continue to accelerate. Now, the only problem is um, people, privacy advocates, who will say, "No, that's too much. You're going way too far." I mean, I'm putting Google in my house. I'm putting Apple in my house, and let them listen to me breathe and sleep. What else are they listening to? And I keep telling those people, I've got some bad news for you. They already know.
Aren't we looking at, right now we've got, again, here, like I said, because it's difficult to get a GP appointment, you're getting people turn up at hospitals and A&E departments with a common cold because they want to see someone. So now, are we not saying that potentially we could be saying, right, instead of coming to us when you think there's something wrong with you, you're now actually being empowered, because we'll know if there is something wrong with you, and we'll let you know if you need to come in to see a GP, because the tech in your house is going to be monitoring you and letting you know, yeah, you should probably think about going making or popping down to your local accident and emergency, or something like that.
Right.
We'll be saving time.
What was the little animated movie about the medical robot? He was like a big puffy white. It's really funny movie,
Yeah.
and it was basically about this kid who ended up this nanotech. It was a fight over nanotechnology, but his brother had created this robot that basically was with you all the time, and it can tell you what's going on with you. And he became a little annoying after a while, but it was really funny. I can't remember the name of the movie, but I could, just looking at that, I can envision a future where we would have something similar to that. Maybe it would be like a booth that's in your home, and you just step into it daily, and it just checks you out and says, okay, yeah, your blood pressure's fine. Hey, your temperature's a little elevated. Or whatever. Do a quick scan, like you said, maybe an X-ray, a CT, and send all that information off to a medical professional. And they say, yeah, okay, you look great today. But again, the problem is a lot of people freak out about that kind of stuff. They say that's giving away too much of my private information. I don't want that in my house. But on the
Well,
flip side, people also complain about what you just talked about, going to see your primary or going to the hospital, and then you got to wait, and the wait's too long. Well, use the technology and you don't
yeah.
have to go through all that.
And if you've had to wait a couple of months for a scan, then the scan tells you no, you're absolutely fine. Well, you could have done that in 5 minutes in your own home and saved all that stress. The whole privacy thing, I'd rather know if I need medical assistance or not. And like you said, all these companies, anytime you fill the form out, they've got all your details. It's yeah,
I
you'd
re-
have to.
I remember my father used to say, because we used to get on him for throwing things away, certain papers, and we're like, Dad, you got to be careful doing that because,
Yeah, yeah,
blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, if anybody wanted to find me, especially anyone in government, they already know where I am.
yeah, yeah,
And his point
yeah.
was, for example, did I make that address that's on my house? I
Yeah.
didn't make that number up. I didn't name the street. Where did that come from? The
And if they
government.
if they want to monitor my blood pressure for me, fair play to them. Then at least
Fair
someone
play.
will be. Yeah, I mean,
And I had to Google real quick. The movie I was talking about was Big Hero 6. So if
that's
you,
it. Yeah, I knew the one you're talking about, but I couldn't remember it either.
what's such
But
an odd name anyway?
I want to wrap up in about 50 minutes or so because I want to give you opportunity again, just because I know you've got some things that you can tell the listeners about. But we're talking about futuristic things, and you've mentioned AI and robotics. So what do you think the next, or what do you think the next advances or use of tech is going to be in the medical world?
I think it's going to be. Now, there was this huge story about a paralyzed man who was able to walk again because they put these implants in his brain and then they hooked him up to some mechanical devices that assisted him with walking. Now, I think most people, myself included, I kind of don't like the idea of that because it's like, I don't want implants in my brain. There's just something about the brain, that's too. So I would like to think that maybe, hopefully, in the future, they can develop something that, it's external and they can just, they can already attach cathodes to you and get certain
Yeah.
readings. Now, if they could get to the point where they can use those same things, maybe even make it like a cool hat, like you can have a cool baseball cap on or, a fedora, and it's got all the little sensors in there. And then if you're paralyzed, you just get into your machine. It just reads through the hat and you just walk that way. I think that kind of medical technology, the development of being able to capture brain signals and interpret them the way that our brain already makes us walk or move our hands. Because, those are things we do. We just don't even think about it, but we
Exactly.
are actually thinking about it. So there's those signals. If they can capture those without implants, I think that's something that may be coming. It's possible.
I get what you mean about the implant, and I'm wondering if that is, like you said, that's kind of like the stopgap. That is the interim period to understand it, because, like you said, we are just electrical pulses and synapses, right? And it's about interpreting that, capturing that, and interpreting that, and manipulating those. So, yeah, I guess the initial stage is how do we capture that and put those into a stimulus onto the brain to kind of kickstart the walking again. It's going to be a fascinating area because hasn't, like, everyone's favorite tech entrepreneur recently, I think, didn't he announce something, Mr. Elon?
It's bad. It's
Yeah.
bad.
We don't need to necessarily go into it, but
It's
it it,
bad.
it does
Stay
feel like
away
that.
from it, folks.
Yeah. Yes, actually, and on that, moving on then. So I do think it's something that's probably already happening now, but is or is something that could be done more. Is a whole AR and virtual reality side of things. I wonder if that's going to become even bigger, or I don't know how much it is now. So, for example, I was kind of looking into it, and this article I saw said that ultimately alternate reality could be used by surgeons for projecting potentially life-saving information into their eyesight during operations. And VR could be used in psychiatry to treat phobias efficiently, and mixed reality would be able to bring revolutionary novelties to medical education or preoperative surgical planning. So I'm wondering if we might see something more in that world in terms of both educating the next generation of surgeons or physicians, or even, like I said, assisting real time within, can you imagine if you've got, I don't know, is it Google Glass or HoloLens or whatever, when you're doing a surgery and it's saying to you, yeah, no, you might want to move the scalpel ever so slightly to the left.
I'm glad you mentioned Google Glass in that whole sentence, because I was just about to say what you talked about was exactly what Google was attempting to do with Glass. So a lot of people criticized Google for Glass, and I was one of them, mainly because I was upset because to get a Google Glass, you had to sign up and they had to accept you. So it was like they made this big announcement, but then you couldn't even buy it. And even when you got accepted, you still had to buy it, and it was expensive. But one of the biggest things that the biggest groups that they pushed it to was surgeons. And that's exactly what they were doing. Google, everyone has if people don't realize by now, Google is a data company. And what they were doing with Glass was they were collecting data. And a lot of that data was medical data, and they've captured it. And then, yeah, they can turn around and, like you mentioned, they can provide this same data to up and coming surgeons or a surgeon who may not be as familiar with a particular procedure. He can pull this information up that was captured by other surgeons using Google Glass. As far as I think eh, what you said about VR and AR, I do believe that that's the best application overall for that stuff. I honestly, there's a big clamor about Apple's new Vision Pro. I honestly think that the average person does not want to wear those things. We've been here before. This isn't
Mm.
this isn't new. It's just that Apple has thrown all of their pretty glossy tech in it. And it's great, but overall, I don't think the average person wants that experience. People don't really like that. It's cool to look at when you go to a shopping mall and you put it on, you go, "Oh,
Yeah,
wow, this is
yeah.
amazing, blah, blah, blah." But do you really wanna watch a movie like that? I don't. Who
We've
wants
all
this
done that.
thing on their face?
We've mentioned it on here. The 3D phase in the homes that lasted all of what 5 minutes, right? So
Right, because it's annoying. Yeah, no one wants it. But if you put it in the hands of, like you said, surgeons who this is part of what they do, and they can get this information in real time, and it could, project realistic images onto the person they're working with.
yeah,
That's an absolute winner as far as I'm concerned.
yeah. You could even have somebody operating in a part of the world and what maybe isn't as skilled. So you've got somebody in another part of the world with the same headset or VR, and they are then almost seeing it like they are operating, so could give
Right.
instructions. I mean, this feels to me, yeah. Everybody says about this kind of Google, etc. But if this is a tech that's going to save their lives in 10 years' time, then they're going to say, "Bring it on!" Right? So
Absolutely, right. I
I
do.
think,
I
yeah,
welcome it, and I think they should continue to develop it. I think it's a great idea, but as a consumer product, I don't think I no, it's not really viable. I mean, eh, it's fun, and then I think that's why, Facebook or Meta, that's why they're smart for just making the Oculus what it is. I mean, it's good for gaming. It's fun
yes.
stuff. It's fun gaming entertainment, but it's not you're not gonna use that daily in an office. Come on.
No. Um, right. Well, I think we've got time. Is there one more thing that you think we're potentially looking at? I mean, I didn't look too deep into it. The whole thing around precision or personalized medicine, where it's tailored to your physical makeup and genetic makeup. I mean, that's probably starting to go down an avenue as well.
I don't think I think the problem with that is that's you get to a point where you're too specialized, where you can't sustain that because it has to be something that everyone can use. Um, how do you sustain saying, okay, this is tailored just for you? So then you got to tailor it also for how many people are in the world now? So how do you sustain a model like that where you say, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it or underthinking it.
Right. Anything else from you?
Well, the only other thing I did have was I've always thought this was amazing, the cochlear implants that help people hear.
Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I I don't have really much else to say about that than I just think it's amazing because when you see videos of like these little kids who are deaf and then they get those
Yeah.
implants and then the look on their faces when they hear for the first time, like they hear their mom talking for the first time, it's amazing. And again, whoever thought of that? And sorry, I didn't pull up the history of that, but that's just incredible. Now, can you imagine? Now, remember I was talking about the brain implants. Imagine
Yeah.
in the future if they can make the cochlear work without the implant. Now, it only goes within your ear, so it's not attached to your brain or anything. But I guess overall, what I'm trying to say is when they can have these types of devices work without actually having to cut you open, to make them work, I think that's going to be genius.
Yeah, that'll be another huge step because, like I said, we've gone from the brutal 1800 type surgeries to the
Right.
current one where we've got it good compared to that. But yeah, there's a way to go where the less invasive you can make things. I mean,
Exactly.
sort of touch wood. I've been fairly fortunate in my life. I mean, the most I've had is I had my gallbladder removed 10 years ago, something like that. But that was done keyhole surgery, so it's not even that bad. The whole keyhole surgery thing. I guess a couple of things I want to take from this conversation, and again, thank you, is about the things we take for granted, but also you something you said a little while ago, and I wanted to pick up on it, but I thought no, I'll bring it up at the end as long as I remember, which amazingly I have. Is you said you keep saying the word incredible, and I think at one point you almost said like apologized for using that word, and I think
Right.
the fact that we can still find things incredible is amazing, and I think that's something that we should take heart in, the fact that there is still stuff that, because this is all stuff that's helping us, right? So yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing to still be astounded or amazed by these things.
And I hope people continue to agree with you, because it can only get better as younger generations come up and are still amazed by it all as well. And on top of that, think, yeah, this is amazing, but you know what? I have figured out another way to do it, a better way to do it. And that's
Yeah,
how
yeah.
things progress and get better and better. So
Right. Well, look, thank you very much. And again, honestly, thank you for sharing your story at the start. Is there anything you want to shout out or plug before we say goodbye?
well, first of all, thanks for having me on again, Dan, and I'll come back anytime. You know how to get a hold of me. And I have no problem sharing that story about my daughter, because like I've said over and over again, it's simply incredible, miraculous to me, just the complete turnaround in her health. And I could talk about it all day, but I won't. The only other thing I want to plug, to keep myself busy creatively, I've always worked on music. It's just always been a thing. I've made music for a couple podcasts as well. Then I just recently, what? My brain's getting ahead of itself. I recently decided I'm going to compile some music that I've actually had kind of just laying around over the years, and then fuse it with some new ideas I have. And I've released this album. It's called Intentionally. You can find it on Spotify. It's under the name Profound Simplicity, and the album is named Intentionally. You can find it there. You can go to YouTube and find it as well. It's just go to Profound Simplicity, youtube.com at Profound Simplicity.
Yeah, I'll
something like
it.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah, mainly that's what I've been working on, just being and working with some other friends, that I've worked with over the years, just doing creative stuff. As far as podcasting, people keep asking about voluntary input, and I say the same thing over and over again. You never know what the future holds. So
absolutely. And in the meantime, we get the enjoyment of getting you on as many times as we can, so onto our pods.
Exactly. I ain't got nothing else to do.
I know. I really appreciate that. And also the other thing is, I know that you had food delivered before, just as this started, so I know I've kept you from that. So yeah, I mean,
spell it still.
So we're going to quickly wrap up. For me, yep, you can get hold of me at castingviewspod@gmail.com and at castingviews on Twitter. And yeah, we'll see you next time. And I'm already starting the paperwork to get Leo on again, so don't worry about that. I'll see you next week.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get